get a Blu-ray release for Sleeping Beauty? Yeah, we did. They put it in the vault, and they're re-releasing it. Is it worth it? Hey guys, this is Morgan with the Rotoscopers, and today I am doing another fabulous Blu-ray review. This time it's the Sleeping, which way is it facing? The Sleeping Beauty Diamond Edition. So Sleeping Beauty is one of Walt Disney's classic masterpieces. It was released in 1959, and it was actually one of the first Disney films where Walt Disney himself wasn't really that involved. That being said, it still took 6 years to make and $6 million, which at the time was one of the most expensive they had ever done. So one thing I think that makes this movie stand out is the art. Ivan Earl was sort of the art director for this film, in charge of the styling and the way that it looked and the visual interpretation of this film. And Walt Disney really gave him free rein to do whatever he wanted. And as a result, we really get sort of a gothic, a very linear film. The trees are very tall, angular, and skinny. Everything's in perspective from the front, even all the way to the back. It's very crisp and clear. And even the characters themselves, they're very stylized in a way. You're not your typical Disney round characters and soft and beautiful. They're a bit more angular and stylized and kind of a UPA style to them. So Sleeping Beauty is based on a European fairy tale of the same name. It was technically called Au Bois Dormant in French, but we translate that to Sleeping Beauty. So this movie tells us about a princess who is cursed by a wicked fairy who wasn't invited to the party. Really, guys? Just be nice to your friends. Even if you don't like them, that person has a heart too, right? They could go on and create a disaster for your life. So just invite them to the party. Everything will be better for it. So this princess named Aurora gets taken away by 3 good fairies. She becomes disguised as a peasant maiden, and she lives basically her whole life living in this forest, not knowing any better. One day she meets a man in the forest who happens to be a prince. Princess? Prince? Destined to meet. But I think this movie is really great. Yes, it is simple, but there's other elements like the art, the design, the style, and the music, which was done by Tchaikovsky. They adapted Tchaikovsky's score to fit the film, and then did some own things like adding lyrics to Once Upon a Dream and all these other things, which I think really enhance the movie and make it really different and unique. So for those reasons, I'm gonna give Sleeping Beauty 5 stars. I'm really between 4.5, 5, 4.5, 5. And you know what? I don't care. I'm just gonna give it a 5 stars because I love this movie. It's one of my top Disney movies that I want to watch. And for that reason, 5 stars. Alright, so let's talk about the bonus features. We all know that this was previously released in 2008. And I'm just gonna say it right now. If you own the 2008 Blu-ray edition, stop right now. Just stop watching. You don't need to buy this one. Yes, there are a few more bonus features, but the 2008 version actually has a ton more. They cut about 18 bonus features which were presented for the Blu-ray release from this release, which makes no sense to me. Why couldn't we just get another disc of features? You have it there. So there are 3 deleted scenes, and these are based on original storyboards that, you know, in the story process, the story got changed and cut. So they have a narrator who's going over each one of these scenes, and also they sort of made the storyboards into a motion comic, so they kind of stretch and move the storyboard, even though it was never meant to be an animatic in any way, but they make it visual enough that it's interesting. Another featurette is called The Art of Evil, The Generations of Disney Villains, and it basically goes through telling us the history of Disney villains. And it focuses on 3 main aspects. There's Lino DeSalvo, who was the head of animation for Frozen, and so whenever he's talking about the history, but then he kind of really talks about Frozen. Disney still can't get over Frozen, so they're kind of pushing like, oh, Hans was a different type of villain because you didn't know that he was a villain until the very end. And then we have Anastasia, who he did Gaston, Jafar, Scar. He was under the tutelage of Mark Davis at one point, and so he really developed these relationships with the 9 old men and has lots to share. So I love hearing from Anastasia, not only for his wealth of knowledge about the old masters, but because he himself is a modern day master, and so both perspectives are fascinating. So mentioning Mark Davis was the animator for Maleficent, so the 3rd kind of main chunk of this focuses on him. How he was originally brought to Disney to do animals. Then they needed him for the human character, so then he started doing a lot of the leading ladies like Alice and Cinderella. but he really always wanted to do a villain, so he finally got to do a villain, and then kind of kept doing the villains. He did Maleficent, he later did Cruella de Vil. It was really an interesting history, not only about the animators who animate the Disney villains, but the Disney villains themselves. The next bonus feature is called At Disney Animation, Artists in Motion. So these At Disney Animation features tell us about today at the Walt Disney Animation Studios, what's going on, and it highlights different artists who play a big part. This one, we get to see Brittany Lee. She did visual development for Frozen, Wreck-It Ralph. She's very famously known for her paper art, whether it's just 2D or sometimes she makes these 3D sculptures out of paper. And Disney commissioned her to make one of Maleficent, and so she makes this big 3D sculpture of Maleficent out of paper. We get to see a time-lapse of her process while she's talking us through it. It's very interesting, it's very short. We've seen a clip of this has been released previously, but it was shortened, and this is the extended. Alright, so the next one is called Once Upon a Parade, and yeah, so this is the typical let's show off the parks. So this one is really kind of bizarre. It reminds me of the Christian Louboutin one from Cinderella, but it's kind of just a fairy tale telling of how a certain parade decoration got started. So we have Sarah Hilland from ABC's Modern Family, and she's telling these kids who are they're into their phones and they're not paying attention, they're not enjoying the magic while they're at Disney World. And so she takes their phones away and she's like, I have a story to tell you. And it's how, you know, one of these parade floats got started. So basically this story is about how all the Fantasyland and New Fantasyland characters were building these floats, and Maleficent was really upset because she didn't have one. And so this little peasant girl who father was a tinker, gotta bring in the tinkers, said, I can do it. And of course the peasant girl is Sarah. And so she spends all night, she tinkers, and she creates this wonderful float for Maleficent. And yay, we saved New Fantasyland and Fantasyland. And now, look, you can see this Maleficent mechanical dragon float. Let's all watch it. And so it's, yeah, it's basically that. The thing that bothered me the most about this though, like, yes, it was a cute little story, whatever. It's on the Sleeping Beauty Blu-ray. Yet we don't see Aurora anywhere. We see Belle, we see Jasmine, we see all the princesses and the princes, Flynn Rider, everyone is there. Except Aurora, which really bothered me. I'm like, really, are we trying to make this all about Maleficent? Because it's not all about Maleficent. They should have just put this on the Maleficent DVD and called it good. How hard was it to take one shot of Aurora and, you know, Prince Philip was there, he was there and he saved the day, whatever, but no sign of Aurora in sight. And I know they didn't want like Aurora to compete with Sarah, who is this peasant maiden, but whatever, no one cares about Sarah, we care about Aurora. Rant over. So the next bonus feature. We've had Barioki, we've had Crabioki, and we've had Marioki. But this time, it's Beauty-oki, obviously. Beauty-oki, which is kind of harder to say than the other ones, is basically a karaoke track of only one song from the film, Once Upon a Dream. I personally would have liked to have seen it for all the other ones. Scumps, scumps, scumps. But no, we don't get to see it. It's just Once Upon a Dream. And I find these a bit disorienting because it's not an actual karaoke track that if you didn't know the words you would have a good time singing along. No. So basically it's just a stylized version of the words popping up on screen. Sometimes they're so huge that like the word takes up the whole screen. Yeah, it's fun and cute, but why didn't they do it for all of them? Alright, so the other bonus features. There is one about restoring the sound. Obviously this is from the 2008 release, but it talks about how they were able to make the sound better for the HD release. There's one making of Sleeping Beauty, which is pretty long and very interesting. There's an audio commentary with Leonard Martin, who's a Disney and film historian, John Lasseter and Andreas Deja. And then there's a featurette about Ivan Earl called Ivan Earl, A Man and His Art. It's 8 minutes long and it talks about him. I mentioned him briefly, how he was very instrumental in the art and design of this film. So it's really nice that we get to see a little bit more about the actual makers of the film. So for Blu-ray features, I'm gonna give them 3 stars. The fact that there were so many others that they literally just left on the cutting room floor is pretty disappointing to me. But the ones that they did create for this are quite nice. So 3 stars. 3.5. 3.5. So that is it. Now I'm going to say if you have the 2008 Blu-ray release, just keep it. These other bonus features are cool, yes, but it's really not worth shelling out another 30 bucks to get another Blu-ray release when the picture is exactly the same. They didn't do anything better to the picture. It was already remastered. It's perfectly crisp. It's beautiful to see. I really like the restoration, unlike some Disney Blu-ray releases where they just kind of just, ugh. But if you do not have this, you have to own this on Blu-ray. I mean, look at this cover. I mean, beautiful. I preferred the other one where she was in her Briar Rose attire, but they changed it and they released this one instead. But I really, really like the cover. I think they're doing a much better job about making the characters look on model. Alright guys, thanks for watching my review of the Sleeping Beauty Diamond Edition Blu-ray. Let me know in the comments below what you are most looking forward to for the bonus features, and a thumbs up if you own this already on Blu-ray. Thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, I'm Morgan, and this is the Rotoscopers YouTube. And Aurora goes into the fortune teller's cape? What is the word? Hut? Tent? Tent. This version is much more juvenile. She's sitting there talking to herself in the mirror as the fairies have gone away, and she's sort of, boo-hoo, my little man, he's gonna, well, he's not a little man, but, Prince Philip, well, I guess it's not Philip, he's gonna, you know, with the dichotomy of Cinderella,